You have to see this. Vice President Kamala Harris, we talked about in a different segment the complete rally that was last night that was epic, but something really interesting is happening. And it's the Harris campaign finally doing what I've wanted Democrats to do for so long. And this is taking the one issue that is Trump's only hope, it seems, at victory, which is unfortunately his insane fear-mongering about the southern border. But the border, as we've talked about, has been a political winner for Republicans, despite everything we know about that issue and how that doesn't make any sense. And so because of the underlying facts that we'll talk about, that Kamala Harris will talk about, if that case will be an offensive case from Democrats, if they could take an offensive case to Republicans, it would devastate Trump's campaign. And that's exactly what Vice President Kamala Harris is doing. And it's so exciting to see. So here's one of the moments from the rally from last night. Then I'll talk with a Republican after the video about this messaging.
Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been talking a big game about securing our border, but he does not walk the walk. Or as my friend Quavo would say, he does not walk it like he talks it. Where's Quavo? So look, our administration worked on the most significant border security bill in decades. Some of the most conservative Republicans in Washington, D.C. supported the bill. Even the Border Patrol endorsed it. It was all set to pass. But at the last minute, Trump directed his allies in the Senate to vote it down. Right. He tanked the bipartisan deal because he thought it would help him win an election. Which goes to show Donald Trump does not care about border security. He only cares about himself. And when I am president, I will work to actually solve the problem. So here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the border security bill that Donald Trump killed, and I will sign it into law and show Donald Trump what real leadership looks like.
And I want to bring in now Tim Miller, anti-Trump Republican extraordinaire, host of the Bulwark podcast, worked for quite some time in Republican politics and now is advocating against Trump and the MAGA movement. Tim, it is great. It's been a long time coming. It's great to be joined with you.
It has. I'm so pumped to do it, Luke. Let's keep it up. You've been doing great work over here.
Thank you so much. And you. So I want to get your take on this. I came across this post from you on X in response to an ad that I'll play for the audience in just a little bit. There's been an unmistakable message out of Kamala HQ that had been missing prior. They are in this to effing win it. They're not messing around. They are not getting bogged down by needing to defend, record / appease coalition. They want to beat this SOB, and it's so refreshing. And again, I'll play the ad that he was responding to that's also on the subject of the border and border policy. So first, break down for the audience something we've gone through a lot, what you thought was missing from the Democratic message that Harris seems to be bringing with the clip we just played and what we'll look at throughout this segment, and then how they're adjusting and what you like about it.
Yeah. Well, first, I wanted more vigor and aggression and attack. And I think that in a lot of ways, the Biden campaign in 2020 made a lot of sense. We're in the middle of COVID. The country was sick of all the craziness. People were looking for somebody to bring us together. I think that fit Biden's style very well. But now, after being in for 4 years, that kind of more passive, unifying type message just like wasn't landing with people. There are a lot of people that were frustrated by what was happening in the country, whether it be inflation, for some people maybe Gaza, for others Afghanistan. Different people had different complaints about the last 4 years. They're frustrated about the two old candidates running again, and there just wasn't that. I come back to the word vigor that you wanted to see running against this horrible threat, Donald Trump. I just think that there was this huge thirst for the Democrats to mirror, our anger and rage and contempt for Donald Trump. And like, that just wasn't Biden's style. And I think that because, that wasn't his style, and because for whatever reason, the president, I think felt very proud of his record and really wanted to defend his record, a lot of times the message got bogged down. And you do a lot of good videos on this about like what the real stats are about the economy and what the real stats are about the border. And all that's good. Fact checking is good. But in politics, you want a clear, aggressive contrast message with the other side, right? You want somebody that's going to say, I did this good thing. He wants to do that bad thing, and what Kamala has done now, I think so effectively over the first 9 days, is really frame this race up as future versus past. Somebody wants to protect your freedoms or someone wants to take them away. And then in this border ad, which we can talk about, somebody that has taken on criminals, has taken on gang members against somebody that only cares about himself and is trying to avoid jail, right? Like, these are good, strong contrasts. And I think she's just been, her and her team have just been way more effective over the last 9 days than what we were seeing from Democrats, earlier in the year.
Absolutely. So interesting. You're touching on a broader messaging efficacy of this new Kamala Harris campaign that I'm also resonating with, because I don't think I knew I wanted more aggressiveness for sure, but I don't think I knew how much there was just waiting there. Part of it is the difference of Harris as a candidate, for example, the prosecutor versus convicted felon framing. But even on a lot of the ways that she's framing this election and the way it's being discussed, seeing Josh Shapiro out there making the case, Tim Walz, all those people were making the case as they should have been with the doubts and concerns around the candidacy of Biden. They were making the case for why he absolutely should have won in that scenario against Trump. But there was a lack of energy, and then some of the aggression we're seeing now that's totally justified. I didn't even know that so many of these different attack lines and phrases, slogans that are already being landed on by the Harris campaign were just there waiting. And it's really exciting. Before saying anything further, here's this ad that we've been talking about.
On the border, the choice is simple. Kamala Harris supports increasing the number of Border Patrol agents. Donald Trump blocked a bill to increase the number of Border Patrol agents. Kamala Harris supports investing in new technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Donald Trump blocked funding for technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Kamala Harris supports spending more money to stop human traffickers. Donald Trump blocked money to stop human traffickers. Kamala Harris prosecuted transnational gang members and got them sentenced to prison. Trump is trying to avoid being sentenced to prison. There's two choices in this election: the one who will fix our broken immigration system, and the one who's trying to stop her.
So since that debacle took place, Tim, I've been losing my mind. At every rally I go to, talking to Trump supporters, I have to ask every single one of them, what do you think of that Trump shot down this once in a multi-decade border security bill? Any conversation where the border comes up and I see Democrats not bring that up, it drives me crazy. Has that also been something that you're thinking, this border conversation, while it clearly benefits Republicans politically in many ways, shouldn't be that much of a political winner for them, especially in the wake of that border security debacle?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. It didn't have to be. I do think we were all, I was just going to listen to you talking about it and how like you didn't realize how much you wanted these contrasts until you got them. It's just because we're living in this little Stockholm syndrome, right? Like, you're so upset at Trump, so angry at Trump, you didn't know, what other options there were out there, except for to focus on how bad he is and focus on the threat. And now when, Kamala is unleashed to kind of make these arguments we've been looking for, you can just see the response, like how much, people are into it. We're going to see this as we go into the rally. But as far as the ad is concerned and the message itself, As I mentioned, my favorite line from the ad is she arrested gang members. She arrested these migrant gangs. She arrested members from these migrant gangs. He's trying to avoid jail, right? I love that. I love that contrast so much. And, the other thing is just this obvious point about how Trump killed the border bill. And I've been saying for months that I think that there are two areas. She hasn't done the second part yet, but I think there are two areas where the Democrats can go on offense here in a big way. One is this: they wanted to do border security. They brought in James Langford, one of the most conservative Republicans in the Senate, to do the bill. They signed up for everything James Langford wanted. They didn't water it down with progressive stuff. Some progressives were unhappy about that. They were willing to do it. They were going to pass that bill and sign it into law, and Trump killed it. So it's like, we wanted to do this. We care about border security. We care about policy. Trump only cares about himself. Such a good message. And then, we'll see if this happens, but and maybe it's better suited from an outside group like a super PAC than from Kamala, but I want somebody to go on offense on the camps too. I'm sorry, the American people are against illegal immigration, that's true. But the American people do not want mass deportations and camps at the border. It's un-American. It goes against, the ethos of this country, what's on the Statue of Liberty, what our country was founded on. And I think that if you go on offense both on Trump killed the border bill and he's putting gross Stephen Miller in charge of these mass deportation camps that they're just going to harass and harangue brown people in this country. I don't think people are for that. I think that's a bad combo for the Republicans. So even though they think it's a good issue for them, I think the Democrats could at least fight it to a draw. And there are a bunch of other issues like abortion that are good issues for Democrats. And if they did so in a compelling and effective way, and we're seeing the beginning of that with this ad, and it's just, it's very welcome.
Totally agree with you. Before going further, here is first Trump, and then we'll put right after it a compilation of Republicans blaming Trump for shooting down this border deal, just to bolster the point we're saying. But here's first Trump taking credit for it and saying you can blame me for that.
And I'll fight it all the way. I notice a lot of the senators are trying to say respectfully they're blaming it on me. I said, that's okay. Please blame it on me. Please.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that, on net, significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you.
But I would acknowledge President Trump failed, along with Republicans, Paul Ryan and the guys. They failed in 2018 to actually move a border security bill to tighten this so that we weren't dealing with this crisis right now. They failed to actually get the wall built. President Trump signed 12 continuing resolutions after he said he would never sign another one if they didn't give him the money to finish building the wall. Look, this stuff matters. It adds up. I call balls and strikes. This is not hard.
The Speaker says that if one migrant comes across the border, that's one migrant too many, and your bill doesn't do enough to completely shut down the border.
Actually, it does completely shut down the border in many ways.
Right. So you can't continue, or you can, but you can't logically, you can't be consistent in fear-mongering about a problem when the solutions to those problems you're just opposed to. And there was no real explanation from Trump except for, this would help the other side. That was really the core of why they shot it down. They were so incoherent in explaining why they were opposing it, other than, and I think it was Troy Nails admitted explicitly, it was just to hurt Biden politically. But one thing I've been picking up on, to move on from that, Tim, and give me your take on this, the discombobulation from the Trump campaign in trying to figure out what their attack line is going to be against Kamala Harris. Her laugh, that's not going to go well when she has all these incredible points and they go after her laugh. Or any of these statements I've heard from Trump, he just seems really disjointed in how he attacks Kamala Harris versus all the things he had practiced a bunch of times with Biden. Why weren't they, or what do you think they're struggling with Kamala Harris, and why isn't there a more effective line of attack from Republicans, at least at this point in time?
Yeah, part of it is I just think that they were kind of. JD Vance admitted it in that secret audio that I guess Washington Post got that CNN played about how they were sucker punched. I think was the line he used. I think they really were caught off guard about the switch. I think they did not expect Kamala to take over the ticket. They had this frame that they'd been working on versus Biden that was strong versus weak. And it was just like for a month from the debate to then the failed assassination attempt, and the way Trump stood up after that. It felt like everything was playing into their hands on this. Where like Trump felt very strong, Biden is weak and dithering, and that's why the world's on fire, and that's why the border, is porous. Now, a lot of that's BS, right? But just speaking just as a political message, that was a very succinct, compelling contrast. Now you have Kamala. That doesn't work. She was a top cop. She's way younger than Trump. You can't do that. You see him at the National Association of Black Journalists today being like, maybe Kamala should try a test to see if she has, a mental acuity test. And you're like, what? And like, I don't know, maybe. And Kamala isn't even black. And like, she didn't pass the bar. He's all over the place. And they haven't settled on anything. I think they'll probably settle on a more traditional Republican attack on Democrats, which is she's an extreme California liberal, and immigration is going to be the top issue they focus on there. And I think that's why this pushback on immigration is so important, and doing it with vigor and aggressively, and doing it in paid ads and all that. And so I think that's what they'll end up settling on. But Trump can't help himself but do the racist, sexist stuff. And so I think that is another reason that their message is going to be muddled, because Trump was like what the strategists wanted to do and what Trump wanted to do with Biden, the strong, weak thing, they were aligned. I think that they're kind of misaligned now. And it's, who knows how long it's going to take them to get their act together, if they do.
That's a great point. You have campaigning going on, and the media can only report on just, by the nature of time, you have limited time in any of these outlets. They have to focus on certain things. They can only talk about so much. And so when daily we're getting these racist, sexist, vile things, that's going to become the headline. And unless you're watching full Trump rallies or watching Sean Hannity, which those people are already going to be voting Trump, you're going to be only hearing about the headline disgusting stuff from them, because they can't be disciplined enough, some of these right-wingers or Trump himself, to just stay on a message that could be effective. They have to jump to that sort of stuff. You mentioned how the California far-left liberal probably will be what they settle on. We're seeing some of that, them on Fox News sort of talking about her past policy stances. While a lot of it's going to be dishonest, some of it is them attacking her for things that I don't think people will be turned off by. There are things, as I've gone through her policy record, as someone who was representing a more liberal constituency, that regardless of how I feel about them or people generally in the online space, as a matter of campaigning, would definitely come off as quote-unquote too far left stances. How do you see her as someone who did have an extremely liberal voting record in her time in the Senate, and has said some things, some clips I've seen, I'm like, yeah, that's not the best stance to have on this or that, at least from a political standpoint. How should she confront that? I think Jessica Tarlov said she should do an interview and say, play every single clip of my past stance. I'll explain how I've moderated, become more bipartisan for the sake of those more swing voters. You, as a more conservative person, what would you want to hear to be assured that she's not going to be too far left in your mind as president?
Yeah, I love Jessica Charloff, but she comes from a journalism background, and I feel like coming more from a campaign background. And like, to me, that suggestion from her is like a lot of explaining. And I've heard everything that she said, but I would recommend not a lot of explaining. The Kamala line is, we're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going to obsess over everything she said in 2019. She ran too far to the left in 2019. No doubt about it. She had Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to her left. I don't believe that was the authentic Kamala. I don't even know if her team would say that it was, if you really give them truth serum, right? She was in this primary And I think that they thought it was a strategic move. And, she didn't have a reputation as being as a far left person. She had a reputation of being more of a law and order kind of Democrat as attorney general and as prosecutor. And so I think that she should fall back on that and run as that. And what we've seen from them already on these issues is they're just being perfunctory about it. She's like, look, here, I'm talking about my plans going forward. All right. You might want to talk about what I said in 2019, what my plan was. I'm not for forcing you to sell your guns back to the government or whatever. I'm not for that. That's not what we're trying to do. Do you know what we're going to try to do? We're going to have background checks. We're going to change the age to 21, whatever, like popular, reasonable gun reforms that everybody can get behind and that even some Republicans are for. Healthcare, you said you were for single payer. No, here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on lowering prescription drug prices for people. We're going to focus on X, Y, and Z. You've already seen this on energy. She said, no, I'm not focused on banning fracking. We're going to invest in green energy. That's what we're going to do. We're not worried about banning things. We're going to be investing in new types of energy. That's what I do from her. It's all forward. And no need to bog yourself down in this. Reposition yourself as a center-left Democrat, which I think is really more true to who she really is anyway. And some Republicans are going to do ads with video of you for 2019, and that's politics. But I don't think that long interviews explaining it all that are as smart as just focusing on going forward.
Totally agree. Yeah, I love that. It does strike me as that campaign brought her there because of who she was positioned between. But a big thing for me has been you put on paper the Biden-Harris record, and I'm sure there are things, but in a general sense, I would be super confident about defending almost everything that's on that in terms of their domestic legislative agenda, especially, has just been really effective, really common sense. And most Americans, I feel like if you just showed, look at all these different bills that Biden signed into law, look at the bipartisanship, look at, like you mentioned, lowering prescription drug costs, you have super popular things being done. A lot of people don't even know that those were happening. And as the vice president, it makes sense to say, well, I'm running on my record in the last few years in the position that's most setting me up to be president. And let's talk about, as you said, what comes ahead. Tim, where can people find you?
Come over to the Bulwark YouTube feed. I got a podcast I do every day on your podcast, favorite podcast app of choice as well. But we're over here on YouTube. I love this. I love that we did this, Luke. You're doing awesome work. Let's do more crossovers. We'll have you over on the other side.
Let's do it.